Thank you for tuning into Ray-ality TV. I'm Ray Bakari. Joining me today is Johnston Mayor Joe Polisena Jr. Joe, it's good to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
You've been mayor now for 2 years, first being elected in 2022. How would you rate the experience so far?
It's been a wild ride. It was a baptism by fire. First coming in, we had to deal with Simmons Village apartment complex burning down. We had the triple shooting, double homicide on the G in court. We had the flooding issues with Belfield. We had to build a temporary exit ramp. We dealt with the death of our police chief. Uh, it's It's been difficult, but that's the job. That's what I signed up for. And I think, Johnston is doing really well, especially compared to other communities.
You've also been in government roles prior to this, serving on the town council, but I can imagine that the day-to-day duties of mayor are a lot different than being a member on the town council. Has there been anything that surprised you so far? It sounds like you listed off quite a couple things from when you started.
Um, I wouldn't really say surprising. It's more, I like problem solving. That's why I wanted to do an executive role more than a legislative role. So it's kind of like, how do you fit a square peg in a round hole? And that's what I really enjoy about the job, whether it be something like an internal personnel issue that we're dealing with or something external with the policy issue.
Has the expectations you had before going into this role been the same as they are now, or is there anything that you got in there and decided, this is a little bit different than I thought it'd be?
Um, I think it's like any other experience when you're looking at it on the outside, you can kind of anticipate what might come up, but when you're actually in the role, whether it's government or in the private sector or just your day-to-day personal life, it's a lot different when you're in the role and things come at you really fast.
And I want to talk about some recent news facing the town and or some issues that are on people's minds that are from the town. One of them is the $215 million school bond that was passed by voters in 2022. It was going to fund multiple projects, new early childhood center and elementary school, and a new middle and high school. So it's a big topic. So let's just start off, set the table where we are currently since that bond is passed.
Yeah, so when that bond was passed, there's a couple of things. Interest rates were 2%. That was pre the shoot up, I should say, in the cost of labor and materials. And when that bond was advertised to the people, that was for a new ECC, that was for a new centralized elementary school, and to renovate Ferry Middle School and to renovate Johnston High School. And what happened is voters passed that bond, I want to say in like April of, was it 22? That's what sounds familiar, April of 22. And why the 215 number was important is because we were using a lot of our, we would call it like quote unquote economic development, but it's no secret to everyone. It was the Amazon money that had come in. And that's why the 215 number was really important. But then, COVID happened, all the after effects of COVID with the interest rates shooting up and materials and labor. And we could no longer do those four projects for the 215. So then we went back to the drawing board and we said, okay, what can we do for the 215? And the plan was sort of rehashed for we'll just do a new elementary school and a new high school. But since then, we've had things come up. We've had a flooding bond that was passed by the voters. We've had that apartment complex issue come up where that was going to be a substantial strain on our services. So that's a municipal complex that we're going to have to pay for. And what's also come up recently, and when I say recently, within the past 2 years, is the structural deficit that the school faces. And we took $2 million of the town's money in the fiscal year for I would say technically last year, the fiscal year last year, we gave them $2 million towards maintenance of effort. In the current fiscal year that we're in, that's going to end like June 30th, we gave them an additional $1 million. So if you want to take the pot of the Amazon money, that 6 million and change, that's already 3 million that was gone to them for operations, which wasn't planned for when we were doing the school project. So things have changed. And another thing that happened with that school bond, and I'd said it publicly. The way that bond was designed to fit in with the Amazon money, that was going to be a no tax increase bond. And essentially, what does that mean? Whenever you see these other communities doing, their school projects, you always see, okay, your average tax increase is going to be X amount of dollars because we were backing into that 215 number and that fit within that Amazon money that I sold it as a no tax increase bond. Since all of that has happened, that can no longer be a no tax increase bond. So it's not fair to give people sticker shock and then you have to come in and say, we're gonna have to raise your taxes by an average of, $450 a year. And people say, well, no, we voted on it. I mean, this was sold as a no tax increase bond. So I have had the discussions with the school committee. I've even said, if you guys want to go back out there and rebond, and it can be put the question to the voters again, and then you can be honest with the voters and say that, we'll do the numbers with our finance director and say your taxes would go up X amount on average. I'm fine with doing that. You can let the people decide with that direct democracy, but I'm not doing it as currently constructed because that's not what was sold to the people and it's not fair to them.
So where is the town currently in regard to building either the new high school or the new elementary school? Is it still in the planning phase?
Oh, so the elementary school, that is up in the sense of the outside, the structure is up. They're working on the interior now. That's going to be opened in the school year of like 26, 27. So not the upcoming year, but the year after that. As far as the high school, I've since said, and we had that eminent domain issue, that I would be willing to do some refurbishments with the high school. But this is like very difficult because the school department asks for more money year over year. The teachers are not I should say the lowest step teachers are not the best paid in Johnston comparatively. The top step teachers make 82,000 plus they have their health care, so that's a pretty decent salary. So there's a lot of things that the money has to go towards, and it can't really be both. We did this school bond, we sat down with the school committee and said, do you want the money for operations or do you want it for buildings? They had said buildings, and what's happened has happened, and trying to manage the money as best I can. This is not my money. This is the money of the 30,000 people that live in the town. So I'm trying to manage it wisely for all of them.
So how much of that 215 million approved has been spent so far?
It would just be the 90 million for the elementary school. That's it. What I'm probably going to do is I'm going to, because the way it works procedurally is that you carry debt. So for the about 120-ish million dollars on the high school, I'm just going to extinguish that debt because we're not going to obviously bond for that full 120 million. So I'll get that off our books. And again, we're still going to have to do that municipal complex. We're anticipating that municipal complex will cost between 40 and 50 million dollars. The average annual bond payment for that will be around 1,517 with our fund balance that we're going to use. So again, I'm trying to think about things before I do it because it seems like it's goes on in other municipalities, it goes on in the state, it goes on in the country, and it goes on in some people's personal finances. It's like buy it now and like we'll figure out how to pay for it later. I'm not going to do that because again, this is not my money.
Yeah, and we're seeing similar issues happening in Warwick and East Greenwich, where you have these bonds that were approved by voters, and now they feel burned because they didn't get exactly what they voted for. I do want to
Yeah.
focus on the high school because that's the other big part of the project, as you were talking about. And it's not the elementary school, that's a done deal, that's good to go, where that part of it has been obliged. So where do we move forward with the high school? It sounds like things are changing with has changed with the cost.
Yeah, so we've met with the school committee and we've said, listen, come up with a plan. And if you come up with a plan, we can kind of tailor that plan and let you know what works from the town's financial side. I think the critical thing for the high school is the CTE. Looking back on it now, I don't want to say we should have done the high school and not the elementary school because we have two like critical problems. Those are really our pressure points. So the problem with the elementary school is we basically have four elementary schools now, and they range from anywhere between like 80 and 105 years old. They're in really poor structural condition, and that's why those needed to be replaced. But looking at it now, there's also an argument that, we could have done repairs to the elementary school and done a new high school because the problem with the high school that Johnston faces and so many other either urban or urban ring communities face is that we lose children to the CTE pathways programs. We currently pay $8.6 million for out of district high school children. It is a lot of money. We do 7.5 on transportation. I'm sorry, 7.5 on tuition and 1.1 on transportation. It's a massive amount of money. And the way Rhode Island works with these CTE programs, it's essentially school choice, but the taxpayers are paying for it. So it costs us $18,000 to educate a child out of the district. And we're doing that right now. And it's very unfortunate. So I've told the school committee, I said, come up with some CTE programs to try to get these kids back, and they're working on that right now.
And I'm glad you brought that up because the last update I saw was by the Sunrise in October, where the council president called for a pause on the construction. You and him both shared an opinion about calling for Rhode Island Department of Education to share more aid. And then the enrollment issues were brought up too. So, as for the high school part of the project, is it fair to say they're just currently giving it a second thought about what the actual plan is going to be? And then,
Yeah, so we're definitely not going to build a new high school. That is not going to happen for the reasons I stated. And also, I'm glad you brought up enrollment. We have, I want to say, 840 students in the high school now. Our total high school population is over 1,000 with the out-of-district children,
Mhm.
but we have the 840 now. For some reason, I can't explain why. RIDE said it was due to quote unquote enrollment trends. The new high school, their capacity was only 760. So I don't know why they would build it for undersized as it is right now, especially when you see, housing being built. But the high school, it was problematic from the get-go. So we're just going to work on a refurbishment. Again, that is a focus on CTE pathways.
So, say there's someone watching this from Johnston who voted for that bond and they're saying, well, 90 million of that 215 has gone to the elementary school. Fine with that. I voted for that. You have the other 100 or so million, 120 or whatever the exact figure is, now not going toward a high school. And then you mentioned a municipal complex. We're going to talk about the Georgia Waterman Road development situation a little bit later on in this. What would you just say to someone who feels burned that they didn't get that new high school?
I would say that the money's not there. I mean, like I can only work with the money that I have. And unless you want a massive tax increase of anywhere between like 6, 8, 10%, I cannot do the high school. Like the money is not there. The math doesn't work.
So moving forward, the plan is to fix the structural issues with the high school, I'm assuming, or at least as of right now.
Um, if no, with the high school, it would be to focus on CTE pathways. So what do they
Okay,
need to do to refurbish that building in itself to bring in
got
CTE
it.
pathways? Do they need to do something as small as like knocking down a couple of walls and creating like a construction pathway? Things of that nature. So it's going to be a focus on CTE, and that's to get these kids back.
And when it comes to money, everybody wants to know where every dollar is going to go, and rightfully so, since it's their tax money. So you mentioned it a little bit, but just to clarify, that remaining figure that is now not going to go to a new high school, where is all that going to go?
So that's not going to go anywhere. It's just money that we're not borrowing. So it's going to lessen the debt obligation. And I'm glad you brought that up because I've seen like some people say like, oh, he's taking money away from education and putting it towards this. No, you can't legally do that. It doesn't work like that. I'm just procedurally, I'm extinguishing the debt. So we're not going to spend that money.
I have one more education question. It's not related to the school bond, and then we'll move on to another topic. At least last check, so I'm not sure if this is still the case, but I believe Johnston is the only city or town that's not signed on to that Learn 365 program. For those watching, Learn 365 was an initiative by Governor Dan McKee. How I understand it, is state money that's going to cities and towns for things that would expand education outside the classroom, like after school programs, for example. Any reason why Johnston's not signed on?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. So number one, this is a joint decision made by both the superintendent and myself. Myself and the school department, we do disagree on some things, as people following the news can see, but this was something that we were in lockstep with for a couple of reasons. Number one is that we don't really have any after school nonprofits in that sense. So I've seen a lot of this money say, well, we're going to go to the YMCA or the Boys and Girls Club. We don't have that in Johnston. The only thing we really do have is a Tri-County Community Action Agency, but they're more to help people with like heating, food, things like that. That's not really an education-centric nonprofit. But number two, and I think most importantly, I don't agree with the principle of the plan itself. I think that we're failing students during school hours in school. I don't know why that is not being addressed, or at least not being addressed to my liking. So I don't know why we're taking money and trying to focus on out of school needs when we have in school needs. And another thing in regards to that, if you're a student with a parent that is involved in your education and the parent sees that the student is struggling, that student's going to get help, whether it's tutoring or whether it's going to, an after school initiative like Learn 365. But what about the students that don't have that parental involvement and they don't have an option to go to an after school program like that? Like we have to help them. And the only way to help them is when they are legally in school. They have to be in school. I think they'll be truant if they're not. I don't know what the age cutoff is So that is what we need to focus on. And once we get to the in-school education being at an optimum level, then you can focus on what happens outside of school. And I think another lesser reason too is just because, kids do things, especially, from a young age, whether they do sports, they do karate, they have hobbies. So again, I think the focus needs to be on in-school learning, not after-school learning.
I now want to talk about housing because the town has made a couple of headlines recently regarding a development that was planned on George Waterman Road. That was originally planned to be affordable housing, but now it's going to be a municipal complex. Just catch folks up to speed of where we are now and what's set for moving forward, because I believe it was a use of eminent domain, if I'm correct.
Yes. So that was what was proposed to give you a timeline is I want to say it like late November, early December, a developer came in and said, we're going to use the density bonuses to get this done with the state housing statute. The maximum we can put in and we're going to put in is 252. It's 100% low income rental housing units. And why the preface of the low income is important, because I've also had people say to me, well, like low income, don't you think that's offensive? So there are like thresholds, right? There's low income, there's middle income, there's workforce housing, and it's on the AMI scale. I think that is like stands for the average median income. And this would have been 80% AMI, so that literally qualifies in as low income. I think like middle income is like 120% AMI. So this would be all people that would come in and they would rent, they wouldn't be owner occupied. And another why I bring that up, which is important, is that there's the 8% law. So what that law is that if you are in that low income housing, you pay 8% of your gross rental revenue. And we did out the math, that would only come out to being about like $460,000 annually from this low income project, and they would cost a significant amount in town services. So the one that I have been kind of going back to because it's really easy to quantify is education. It's $18,000 on average to educate a student. Say, so 252 apartments, say it averages 2.5 people per apartment, because some will have like 4, some will have 2, but say 2.5 is the average. That say if it's 2.5 and 252, it's like 630. So you have 630 people there in total. I think it's really fair to say that 100 will be school age children of the people living there. I don't think that's an unrealistic ratio. So if you have 100 times the 18,000, that's $1.8 million. And that's just for non-IEP students. If you have an IEP, the cost fluctuates depending on how severe the IEP is. So that's money that we would have to come up with. And I have also said to people, like, if there was some form of a state aid, or the state came in and said, we're going to cover the cost of the education and the services, we're going to give it to you in your state education formula, then I don't have an argument to come back on and say I'm protecting the property taxpayers that currently live in Johnston now, because their tax money wouldn't be going to this. It would be backed up by the state, but that's not the case. So when this was presented, since I got elected, I've been looking at putting in a new municipal complex. It happened in April. We started doing engineering work actually on a couple other sites throughout the town. It didn't end up working. There was one site that it would have worked logistically and we could have fit the buildings we wanted to do, but the asking price was really high. And we sat down with the property owner. We just couldn't get to a number. And we said, all right, let's wait. Let's see what happens, explore other options. And then, as you know, what happened in the meantime, this low income project got proposed. And I didn't realize there was that many acres over there. So it's 31 acres, but only 11 of the acres are buildable. But 11 acres is still a good amount. So I put 2 and 2 together and I said, well, I've been looking for a new municipal complex. We've been looking for land to do it. This site would be perfect. It's on a main road, which is a state road. It has sewers, it has water, it has gas. So it kind of fits the criteria for everything. So myself and my administration, we worked really hard. And in 6 weeks' time, we came up with the design that we proposed at the council meeting. And then to show to people that this wasn't just, pretext for that to kind of like stop that apartment complex, we gave the presentation of the state that our buildings are currently in. And I don't think anybody could argue that the police station, the fire headquarters, and town hall are in good shape. I mean, I tried to be transparent. I posted the pictures online. I had the police chief, myself, and the fire chief. We all read off our respective reports at the council meeting. And I think anybody who just looks at that could see that those buildings are in really rough shape and they need to be upgraded.
Now, the part where this made headlines is, as you and I, and virtually probably everybody that's paying attention to Rhode Island politics knows, there's a housing crisis, and there's an emphasis, especially by state leaders. The speaker, Speaker Shikarchi, wants to build more, because it's a common belief that building more housing will reduce costs of housing and try to fix the crisis. I mean, obviously, it's a multifaceted issue, but
Yeah.
someone watching may be thinking, why stop low income housing? It sounds like the argument boils down to a strain on town services, but then somebody thinking might be saying, if we have this issue and the state leaders want every city and town to do their fair share, why prevent this?
Yeah, because again, it's a financial issue with the costs. If the state was coming in and backing up saying, we won't just give you, because a lot of this is done through state aid with schools because of the formula. Usually, I mean, I know for Johnston, it's 2/3 of the school funding comes from the town and another 1/3 comes from the state. I would assume that varies depending on your district. But it's strictly a financial issue. And if the state were smart about it, they would offer more funding and not just enough funding to cover the cost of like a massive housing project coming in, but say, what, we'll give you 120% of that cost. So you not only cover, the cost of the new housing coming in and the cost to educate those kids, but the extra 20% will be like an incentive, and it's kind of like a race to the top. But they just passed the laws and they passed the burden down on the property taxpayers. And it's like super difficult to meet with people, especially right now with how, high everything is. We're hearing about energy bills now, food inflation is stopped, but prices are still high. So it's very difficult to like look people in the eye and say, I'm going to have to raise your taxes for people that don't even live here yet. So it's difficult to do, and my responsibility is to the 30,000 people I represent. The adage I've used is I'm not the mayor of Rhode Island, I'm the mayor of Johnston. So I'm always going to try to do what's best for the people in Johnston. If it was a smaller project, like we have a few smaller affordable housing projects going on. We have one at Shun Pike. It's kind of on the Johnston Situate line. That's going to be 34 townhouses. 17 are affordable, but that's middle income. It's going to be 100% AMI. Those are going to sell from like 350 to 400,000, and the remainder are going to sell between 450 and 500,000. But the good thing about those, they're owner occupied. I think, for most people, it might be different. If you're young, my first kind of out of my parents' house experience was in an apartment, or if you're in a transition because of personal matters, or maybe if you're a little bit older, I think an apartment would fit your needs. But I think for the vast majority of people, they want to own a home, and it takes the kind of track that it always has. You want a small starter home, and then you kind of upgrade to a bigger one if you choose to be married and have kids, things of that nature. So these are owner occupied, the ones off Shun Pike. And then one more recently in the news is Pine Hill. The majority of that Pine Hill project is in Situate. I want to say it's like
27
40,
units and then 15 in Johnston.
yeah, 15 in Johnston. And of the 15 in Johnston, only three of those are, again, that's called middle housing. It's 100% AMI. So like why I'm not speaking up on that and why I'm not blocking that is, number one, I agree with it because it's owner occupied and it's middle income housing. I mean, 100% AMI. I want to say for a family of four, that's like $120,000. So that's basically like a nurse and a teacher, teacher and a firefighter. It's like middle class jobs.
Do you favor
Uh,
the Johnston portion of the Pine Hill Road proposal?
oh yeah, again, because like what would be my argument to say that that's not good? We need housing, and just 15 homes and 34 homes. And again, they're owner occupied. That's not going to be like a massive strain on services like the 252 that was proposed to George Waterman. So.
One more housing question, then I'm going to move on to a couple two more topics, and before we close things off. So it's a complicated issue, as someone watching may hear. It's a bit of a longer explanation because it's multifaceted, and there's
Yeah.
obviously the role the state plays, the roles the city and towns play. However, and I'm not saying this is a view that you share. There was a member on the the zoning board who had made a comment saying that this kind of development could be like the next Chad Brown. Chad Brown, for those watching, is a neighborhood in Providence, and it's affordable housing, low income. Um, so I got to say, because then you hear the terms like NIMBYism, not in my backyard, come up, and then kind of those type of arguments that then turn it into more of like a social issue. Is there anything you could speak to for that? Because you got to at least see why there are folks who are strongly holding those views.
Oh yeah, I see it. I mean, the two. So number one, to address that guy, that was an embarrassment. He embarrassed himself, and I've said from the beginning, like I've thrown out a lot of numbers at you, a lot of statistics, a lot of data points. You have to use numbers and statistics when you want to back up your argument. I know where Chad Brown is, but I don't know the size of Chad Brown. I don't know what the AMI percentage is. So it could be like that. It could not be. I really don't know. I think you need to say, well, there's this development, and this development is 250 units, and it's 100%, or I'm sorry, it's 80% AMI, and it's rentals. And then you say, okay, you look at all those data points, and that matches what they're doing at George Waterman statistically. I don't think Chad Brown does. I don't think it's that big, so it seems like very dissimilar. But when it comes to NIMBYism, oh yeah, it happens all the time. Like the two projects I talked to you about, the Pine Hill one and the Shun Pike one, I was getting phone calls on that from people saying, I don't want that near me. And the funny thing is, like I had one person call me and they were like totally against it. And I looked up their assessment value. The houses on Shun Pike is worth more than the single family home that they're living in. So like I mean, that's going to happen anywhere. You just need to have somebody who's in a position like I am to say, like, how does this benefit the town as a whole, or is this detrimental to a town as a whole? And these two projects of Shunpike and Pine Hill, even though I'm taking phone calls saying people like, I don't want that near me, well, that's not detrimental to the town, so I don't really have an argument against it.
And one more actually before we move on to the next one, because
Yeah.
this just popped up in my mind. So you're planning on having like the new town hall in that area? So
Yes.
your office and currently where it is there anything that could even go there if town hall moves out of there?
Uh, Probably not. I mean, it's like so small.
Yeah, it's like
And
yiked up on a corner near an intersection for those
yeah,
watching.
and for anybody that comes lately, they have a developer bought the plaza that it abuts Town Hall, and they did a really good job with that. But why I bring that up is because they repaved it and they only repaved their area. So you can see where the new pavement is and the old pavement, and the old pavement to the building is what the town owns. And it's like really small. Like we only have 8 parking spaces out there now. So I don't even know if anything could be done with this. I would probably just kind of keep it as is. And I mean, a third of the building's used for storage anyway. So I would just keep it as is. But the police station and the fire station, that's a different story.
I do want to talk about the politics of Johnston because
Yeah.
although so you're a Democrat, all the town council members are Democrats, it votes Republican sometimes statewide and more importantly federally. The three presidential elections that voted for President Trump, a Republican actually picked up a general assembly seat in the town, Richard Fascia in House District 42. What do you think attributes to that those kind of voting patterns?
I think it's so they used to always say like all politics is local. I don't think that is really true anymore. It might be true in the sense of like the local Democrats keep getting in. But I've had so many people say, well, the local Democrats keep getting in because they represent the views of the people that they represent. And nationally, those views now might have shifted more to the right, whereas before they might have been just like to the center or a little bit left of center. I think the Democratic Party has made like a massive shift to the left, more so than the Republicans have made a shift to the right. And I think, you kind of see it everywhere. It's not just a Johnston thing. Johnston might be the only kind of community that is like turning more red. Um, but you see the divide in Rhode Island that you kind of see throughout the country. I mean, if you have like Rhode Island in front of you, you just draw a line down, and the eastern portion of Rhode Island is all blue, and the western portion of Rhode Island, where it's more rural is more red. It's like that in the United States, kind of like the further west you go, before you hit the coast is all red, but everything on the coast is blue. I think the Democrats have like a massive problem on their hands. They've gone too far to the left. They have like absolutely no shot to win back the Senate. They're going to be playing defense in Michigan, where I know the senator just announced his retirement. So they're going to play defense over there. They're going to have to play defense on their two seats in Georgia, which Georgia went red. And I think other than those two senators, Warnock and Ossoff in Georgia, it's like literally a red state with everybody else. So they have like a massive problem on their hands, and they have to kind of like look in the mirror and say, like, do we want to be activists or do we want to be, elected officials? Because if you're an elected official that can't win, you're really nothing more than an activist. So, and I think the last thing I would say is that November election was a thumping. I think Trump was the first Republican to he didn't get a majority of the popular vote, but he still won the popular vote. It was like 49 point something percent and change. Might have been the first Republican to do that since like Bush did it.
Yep, and
So
no
that,
four.
yeah, yeah. So that was like a thumping. And I mean, for everything that Trump does, I don't think anyone would equate him to being like the next Ronald Reagan. So objectively, you could look at him and be like, your candidate got beat by like a really bad candidate. So if Trump is like the evil person that you're making him out to be, what does it say that your candidate got absolutely smoked by him? So they really need to do some soul searching. And the last thing I will say is like what states are becoming more blue. So like you look at Florida, like Florida's gone, Florida's deep red. I think Trump won that by like over 10 points. Ohio used to always be the bellwether, right? In like the early 2000s. Ohio's gone, Ohio's deep red. I don't know any states that have turned blue in that time. Like I think Arizona is still kind of purple. They had
And it
a
really
like
depends on candidate quality for Arizona.
yeah, definitely, because they had like a ticket split with Trump winning Arizona, but Gallego winning the Senate seat. So when you have those like razor thin margins, it matters. But I don't see like another state for the Democrats being like a Florida and an Ohio for the Republicans. And if you look at the House map will always be proportionate because of proportionate representation, but they have a really, really hard path with the Senate going forward. And it looks like it's only going to get worse because they really can't speak to rural America.
Yeah, the only state I could think of that would even fit that is North Carolina because the Democrats swept statewide. But again, that boiled down to candidate quality, and that's obviously worth another episode of its own. So, just out of curiosity, did you vote for Harris in 2024?
I will leave that to people's imagination on who I
You don't want to.
voted
You
for.
don't want to do the Charlie Lombardi, Mayor of North Province, and just say who you voted for.
No, I mean, because in honesty, I'm not a fan of either candidate. I think Trump speaks to a lot of people with, cultural issues and what you see, but I have to say I'm not like a big fan of tariffs. I'm an old school capitalist. I'm an old school with free trade. I want my goods cheap from China. I don't want to pay, a ton of money for my goods made in the United States. I think there's certain exceptions to that with like pharmaceuticals, defense spending. But as I say, I don't want to pay like $800 for my Nikes made in the United States. I'd rather pay like $120 for my Nikes made in China. And I think the Democrats were smart. They have a real opportunity to go all in on the free trade and say, we want to benefit people. People are hurting right now. We want them to get these goods as cheap as possible, but they're not doing that.
Do you consider yourself a moderate?
Oh yeah. I mean, like, and that's another thing. Like, what's the difference between like a conservative Democrat and a moderate Republican? Like when you're in the middle, because I've had people say that to me, like, "Oh, you should just run as a Republican." I mean, there's really no difference. And like, there's plenty of Republicans that the Republican Party hates. I think if you polled like 100 Republicans, they would have a more favorable opinion of Joe Manchin than they would of Mitt Romney. And so you get what I mean? Like party identification only matters to a certain extent. It's kind of like the candidates and what they put forth.
It's crazy how it switched too, in terms of what kind of voters voted for both parties now compared to 20 years ago when you had that last popular vote win for a Republican. I want
Yeah.
to ask the million-dollar question. You're in an interesting position politically. You're up for re-election in 2026 because it's a four-year term. However, I've heard your name listed as a possible lieutenant governor candidate. Do you plan to run for LG in 2026?
I don't. I like being mayor. No offense to the current lieutenant governor. I would rather be a mayor of any community than be a lieutenant governor. I just get to do more. I get to enact some policy changes in here that I think are good for the residents of Johnston. Um, I enjoy what I do. I enjoy, policy focused areas of governing. I don't think you can really do that in like a lot of state offices, except for maybe like general treasurer, maybe AG.
So you're
But
going to
yeah, no,
run for re-election in 26.
oh yeah, yep, I'm gonna
Do you
run.
do you have
I'm
a
planning on it, and instead of something like catastrophic happening to myself or my family, I'm planning on it.
do you have a timeline for when you would plan to make that official?
Um, Not really. I mean, I would say sometime in like spring of 26.
And aside from lieutenant governor, there's also going to be a race for governor. It's right now it's believed that Helena Folks, who was the runner-up in the Democratic primary in 2022, is going to run it back and challenge Governor Dan McKee, the current incumbent, who's also a Democrat. It's no secret of you and the governor's relationship. And we've seen Helena in Johnston for recent events, and you even had a photo op with her. I believe it was in September 2024. Would you support Helena if she jumps in the race?
Yeah, and it goes beyond politics now. Lena has been a great friend to me, a great friend to the people of Johnston. And I think she does something that a lot of people would take wise to, not even in Johnston, but just kind of like everywhere else. She shows up. I think for a lot of people, sometimes that's what matters. And I always say I'm like an anti-Buddy Cianci. I'm not like the shaking hands, kissing babies, cutting ribbons, doing proclamations. I'd like to be more like in the background and policy oriented on like getting things done. But at the end of the day, that's what you have to do. You have to show up for people if you're in a position like this or you're seeking a position as an elected official, whether you like it or not, you represent the people or you're prospectively going to represent the people, you have to show up. So I think, from what I hear from people in Johnston, they just want someone to show up for them. They don't have to agree with everything they say, but they just want someone to show up.
I want to end things off with non-political topics. You're a Rhode Island College graduate, as I am too. What was your time like at the college?
My time at Rick was exactly what I was going for. It was just a part-time in the sense of I didn't really want like a college life at like a URI or another school living there. So I just went to my classes pretty much in the morning. I worked at Walgreens down the road from Town Hall here during the day. And I just treated Rick, very much like a job. I think Rick is superior to URI because of the affordability factor. I mean, it was a lot cheaper than URI is now. Or I'm sorry, back then. I don't know what it is now. I'm assuming it's still cheaper than URI, but I don't
Yeah.
I don't know what the tuitions have gone to. I would encourage as many people as possible to go to Rick. I love kind of like that part-time feel. I know there's some people that live there, but it's mostly a commuter school. I'd love to see the state, keep investing money in Rick. I know they've done the Cybersecurity Institute, but I really think Rick is kind of like a gem of Rhode Island because it gives you that 4-year bachelor's degree. But again, you don't have to go and live there and do all of like the college things. You can still, just work a job, either part-time or full-time. You can kind of like hang out with your friends that are in Rhode Island. So that was perfect for me, and I'm very happy I went there.
That was exactly what I did too. Worked part-time, got my degree, didn't live on campus, so like 10, 15 minutes away tops. What did you major in?
Criminal justice. I was a criminal justice major. Yeah, I was actually thinking of becoming a police officer, and then things just kind of happened, and I said, you know what, let me try at law school. I can have a lot of opportunities with law school. And then everything kind of snowballed from there.
You're also a big pro wrestling fan, as I am too. Just quickly, and then we'll end things off with this one because I always like to stay away from politics at the end. What did you think
Yeah.
of Jay winning the Rumble? Because a lot of people had a strong opinion about that. And does Cena get the title?
Yeah, I'm not a big Jey Uso guy. And I'm not a big Jey Uso guy for the reason of him being like, I want to say a fad, but I would make him akin to Daniel Bryan and Kofi Kingston, where they kind of catch like lightning in a bottle, but then when push comes to shove, they're not really good as like, as like the head of the card. So I'm not a big Jay fan, but I think he's gonna get it. We'll see. I think he's gonna beat Gunther. And then Cena, yeah, I think that would be a nice hurrah for him. And it's so funny because when I was growing up, I always hated John Cena. I was like a Randy Orton, Triple H, Edge, like I was all into the heels. And now that I'm in my mid 30s and Cena's in his 40s, he's like the last like semblance of my childhood that's still there. So I'm rooting for him now just for nostalgia purposes. I don't know your feelings about him.
I agree as well. I used to be anti-Cena, especially during the early 2010s when the "Let's go Cena, Cena sucks" chants were very prominent. I was
Yeah.
big on The Rock winning that. I was big on Lesnar winning whenever they faced, especially the Suplex City match. And yeah, now it's just you grow up to respect him because you appreciate the values and what he did, leading the company, selling the arenas out around the country and international for like better half of 13, 14, 15 years when The
Yeah.
Rock and Austin left. So it's like you're saying, last bit of our childhood. And yeah, I think he'll win it. I personally hope he does. And yeah, we'll see what happens there. No pun intended. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. Hopefully he gets it at Mania, but I can see them dragging out the chase just, for more storyline purposes, which could be fine too.
Yeah. Who I gotta ask you like all time your favorite wrestler. I know it's tough to do one, but if you had to pick like
That's that
undisputed.
that is tough. I really liked Goldberg. I was a big Goldberg guy. I've also begun to appreciate more of Taker's impact because he was the lone guy who stuck with the company when everybody jumped ship to WCW. I would say like Taker, Goldberg. Yeah, I'm starting to Roman's starting to grow on me, especially after
Yeah.
this heel run. It showed that he's really got more than just being ooh ah and that
Yeah.
suffering succotash, which was the worst promo in history.
Yes. Yeah. No, he they gave the people what they wanted, which was a heel turn, which they never gave Cena.
Yeah, I mean, we might get a little bit of that, but that remains to be seen. I think this is a good place to end things, Joe. I really appreciate you coming on, and yeah, thank you for giving me your time for this.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching this episode of Ray-ality TV. To see future episodes as soon as they're posted on this channel, please click the subscribe button down below and the post notification bell icon to the right of it. I'm Ray Bakari. I'll see you next time.